My name is Ryan Carter. I'm 82 years old, and until my father passed away, I believed family meant loyalty, but I was wrong. 2 months after my father's death, my uncle stood in front of the probate court with an insurance policy and his name written in big, bold letters as the beneficiary of my father's $3 million life insurance payout. According to him, my father had changed the beneficiary just 10 days before he died because I was too irresponsible to be trusted with that kind of money, and everyone in my family had believed him. Even my own mother had testified in court that my father had lost all faith in me by the end of his life. I didn't interrupt them, didn't argue. No point in that. I was going to prove my uncle wrong, not with words, but with evidence. The problem was, at that exact moment, I had no evidence. My uncle, Victor Carter, was sitting across the courtroom wearing the same black suit he had worn at my father's funeral. He looked cool, composed, like he already had the money in his bank account. Beside him was my mother, dabbing tears from her eyes every few minutes, casting glances at the judge, acting as though she was heartbroken by this whole ordeal. She wasn't. She just wanted the judge to believe she was looking out for me. The petition claimed that during the last few weeks of my father's life, his opinion of me had drastically changed. They stated that he didn't think I could handle a significant sum of money, and he had personally decided to name Victor as the rightful beneficiary of the policy. I have to admit, it sounded plausible. If I didn't know my father personally, I might have fallen for it too. The policy was worth exactly $3 million. Not 2, not 5, but 3. Enough to erase the debt Victor had secretly accrued over the past decade. Enough to save his flailing construction company. Enough to drive him to desperate measures. The insurance company had frozen the funds until the courts decided who was legally entitled to them. Victor smiled at the judge whenever their eyes met. He probably considered this whole hearing to be a formality. The one thing nobody else in that room realized was that Victor's entire argument rested on a single document, a beneficiary change form that my father had supposedly signed just days before his death. If that form was legitimate, I would lose everything. If it wasn't, Victor wouldn't just be stealing a life insurance policy. He'd be committing a federal crime. After opening arguments, the judge told everyone to come back after lunch before the evidence. Victor leaned over to me as everyone rose from their seats. He smiled, and then quietly said, "You should have visited your father more before he died." For a moment, I wanted to smack him. Instead, I looked him in the eye and said, "I hope you're enjoying today, because I have a feeling it's going to be your last good day." I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Little did I know that just under an hour later, my phone would ring, and that one call would change my life. I walked out of the courthouse, not stopping as I blew past the scrum of reporters at the entrance. They wouldn't know my name or care what happened in there anyway. It was just another family wrangling over money. The phone pinged before I'd made it to the door of my pickup truck. Unknown number. Most of the time, I would have ignored it. For some reason, I didn't. "Ryan Carter?" the man's voice said. "Yeah, my name is Daniel Mercer. I'm retired from North Point Life Insurance 6 months ago. Spent 23 years investigating insurance fraud claims." I raised an eyebrow. "How'd you get my number?" "I can't tell you over the phone, but I can tell you this." He paused. Your uncle is lying." I stopped walking, my heart giving a sudden leap. "What do you mean?" "The beneficiary change form." My hand tightened around my phone. "What about it?" "It shouldn't exist." We let a moment hang between us. Then his voice dropped to a murmur. "I reviewed your father's policy 3 weeks before I retired. It was flagged for a routine quality audit. It struck me as a little odd." "How?" "The change of beneficiary was submitted only 10 days before your father passed away." "I know that." "No, Mercer corrected, his tone serious. You don't. It was never processed through the normal system. I rested my weight on the door of my truck. What are you saying? I'm saying that somebody bypassed the company's standard verification process for changing a policyholder. My stomach plummeted. That's impossible. It is. Or it should be. He went on. Every time a policyholder changes beneficiaries, there is a record, a digital timestamp and IP address, employee identification, system entry timestamp. There's almost nothing in your father's file. So the form is a fake? I didn't say that. Mercer cleared his throat. What I did say is, part of the documentation was removed. I could barely breathe. Why are you telling me this? Because 2 days after I questioned the discrepancy in that file, I was instructed to stop investigating it. Who told you to stop? I don't know. And a week later, I took early retirement. The line went quiet, and I almost hung up, figuring it was some crackpot. But Mercer's voice came back, firm and steady. I kept copies of the key evidence. My eyes snapped open. What kind of copies? The quality audit notes, the system logs, and one email someone apparently forgot to delete. I looked back towards the courthouse. Victor was still laughing with his attorney on the steps. They had no clue I was talking to a retired insurance investigator. If those records indicate what I suspect they indicate, Mercer continued, then your uncle didn't just steal $3 million. He committed insurance fraud, and he didn't do it alone. Before I could formulate a question, Mercer uttered something that sent shivers down my spine. Ryan, I think somebody inside the insurance company helped him. Then the line went dead. I sat there for almost a minute after the call cut out, phone still in hand. Either Daniel Mercer was lying to me, or some seriously elaborate plan was in motion to waste my time. I didn't have the luxury of chance. The next morning, I met him at a little cafe 40 miles out of Chicago. He came with a plain brown envelope. No briefcase, no laptop, just the envelope. He sat down, slid it across the table, and told me to open it. Inside were copies of some system logs, internal emails, and my dad's policy history. On the page, the marked in red pen was a single sentence. Beneficiary change, processed, 9:42 p.m. Daniel tapped on the page. Apparently the changes was authorized by your dad, signed on the change forms that night. So, I pulled his location and found out that he wasn't at home. He was admitted at St. Matthew's Medical Center that night. I asked, trying to make out how the pieces fit. He never got out. The small room became suddenly airless. Daniel continued. The change was processed while your father was on life support. I remembered that night too. My father was experiencing a second stroke. I remember looking into his room, seeing him struggle to lift a spoon. According to his medical records, he hasn't uttered a coherent sentence since he got admitted to St. Matthew's that night. So who authorized it? I asked, my voice quivering. Daniel shook his head slowly. That's the thing. He then slid me another document. This is the access log. 3 people were authorized to approve emergency beneficiary change after working hours. 2 was on vacation, and the other was the senior claims manager, a certain Melissa Granger. What happened to her? I asked, my suspicion growing with every word. She resigned, about 5 days after your father passed. Another coincidence, or not. Daniel pulled another page from the envelope. This is why I called you. A bank record. A wire transfer. In the sum of $185,000. It was from an unknown company, and was made out to Melissa Granger less than 2 weeks after my father's funeral. Who owned that company? I asked. Daniel looked directly into my eyes. That's where it got interesting. The company no longer exists. It was dissolved 3 months later, but before that, it had only one authorized signatory. I gulped as I saw my uncle's signature. Victor Carter. Suddenly, this wasn't a lawsuit about a policy, but a well-constructed scheme built on my father's death. Daniel didn't stop there. He took out a small USB stick from his inner jacket pocket. "I'm not supposed to have this," he said. "It's a copy of the security video from the insurance office that night your dad's beneficiary changed." I looked at the USB, hoping, begging for it to contain what I thought it did. "If this shows what I think it does," Daniel said, nodding slowly, "your uncle won't lose the case." He then quickly glanced towards the window. His whole persona changed in an instant. "Ryan," he said, "don't turn around. Somebody has been watching us for the past 10 minutes. I wrestled the urge to turn back around. Daniel stared out the window of my apartment. "Blue pickup," he said softly, "parked across the street. Do you know it?" He nodded once. "I've seen it before." "Where?" "Outside my house." A shiver worked its way through my stomach. "Victor?" "I don't know," Daniel replied, "but someone clearly doesn't want me talking to you." He pushed up from the couch. "We need to leave separately." "What about the USB?" He placed it in my hand. "Make copies. Today." Without another word, he pushed open the back door and walked out into the night. I waited 5 minutes before slipping out the front. The blue pickup was gone. So was Daniel. I drove directly to my attorney's office. Her name was Rebecca Sloan, and her specialty was probate litigation and financial fraud. After I finished my story, she plugged the USB drive into an offline computer. A grainy security video popped up on the screen. The timestamp on the footage corresponded exactly with the night my father was said to have changed his beneficiary designation. The insurance office was nearly empty. There was only one other person in the lobby, a woman who stood near the entrance. The clock showed 9:38 p.m. when the door opened and a man with a baseball cap obscuring his face walked in. The video caught him signing one form. Melissa stamped it. 4 minutes later, both of them walked out of the office. Rebecca paused the video. "Do you recognize the man?" I shook my head. "No." She zoomed in on the man's wrist. A silver watch. A blue face. A tiny scratch next to the clasp. My breath caught. "I know that watch. Where did you see it?" "My uncle. Victor had worn that watch for years. He'd gotten it for his birthday from my dad." Rebecca didn't seem convinced. "A watch alone might not be enough." "I know," I conceded. She rewound the footage and paused it at the man's left hand as he reached for the doorknob. His ring finger wore a large gold signet ring emblazoned with the Carter family crest. Victor had never taken it off. Rebecca leaned back slowly. "Okay, this is getting very serious." She immediately requested the original security footage from North Point Life Insurance. We received their response the next morning. Request denied. Reason: original recording unavailable due to server failure. Rebecca read the email twice. Then she started to laugh. "They're lying." "How can you be sure?" "Companies don't lose evidence that has been preserved for the purposes of ongoing litigation. Ever." She filed an emergency motion with the court, asking the judge to preserve all North Point Life Insurance files related to my father's policy. 3 hours later, someone broke into Daniel Mercer's house. No valuables were taken. Not the television, the jewelry, or the cash. Just one item: the filing cabinet, where he kept all the documentation from the insurance investigation. When I tried calling Daniel, his phone went straight to voicemail. He never answered again. Daniel Mercer had disappeared. The police ruled it a missing person case. I didn't. The people who'd broken into his house hadn't taken jewelry or electronics. They'd stolen evidence. That told me all I needed to know. 2 days later, Rebecca called me into her office. "We found him." My heart leaped. "Is he okay?" She nodded. "He's alive." Daniel had checked himself into a private hospital under a new name after someone ran his car off the highway the night we'd met. He'd come out with a broken arm and a concussion. Before anyone else could get to him, he'd signed a sworn affidavit, and he'd handed over something he'd never told me about. A company-issued backup drive. Unlike the USB drive I'd given her, this one contained the insurance company's internal server archive. The files had been automatically backed up before anyone could scrub them. Rebecca smiled for the first time in weeks. This is what we've been missing. The court reconvened 9 days later. Victor looked as self-assured as ever, his lawyer's argument a familiar refrain. I was just delaying the case because I couldn't accept my father's choice. Then Rebecca stood. Your Honor, we would like to introduce new and previously undiscovered evidence. A hush fell over the courtroom. On the screen, Rebecca displayed the server logs. Every action logged against my father's policy, the who, when, and from where, scrolled down the page. One line sent a shockwave through me. Employee login, Melissa Granger. 37 seconds later. Remote session established. Rebecca zoomed in. The remote computer was not my father's computer. It wasn't an insurance company computer. It belonged to Carter Construction, LLC. Victor's company. Victor's posture shifted. For the first time today, he looked uncomfortable. Rebecca wasn't done. She played a recording of a phone call recovered from the backup drive. Melissa's voice filled the courtroom. I processed the change just the way you asked. You'll get the rest of the money after the claim is processed. A man's voice replied. Can the speaker be identified? The judge interrupted. Rebecca nodded. The FBI audio lab compared this recording with a deposition Mr. Victor Carter provided in an unrelated business lawsuit 3 years ago. She handed the report to the judge. Voice match, 99.4%. Victor's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection! The judge overruled him. Rebecca's final piece of evidence was a hospital nurse. She had been caring for my father during his last week. She testified that my father had never signed anything after being admitted, his right side paralyzed and incapable of holding a pen. Silence returned to the courtroom. Slowly, the judge turned toward Victor. Mr. Carter, would you care to explain how your dying brother managed to sign a beneficiary form from an intensive care unit while your own company was accessing the insurance system remotely? Victor remained silent. His lawyer leaned over, whispering in his ear. Victor pushed the microphone away. I want my lawyer, he said quietly. The courtroom erupted. The judge immediately referred the case to federal prosecutors for insurance fraud, wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The insurance company voided the illegal beneficiary change. 31 days later, the full $3 million payout was released to me. Victor was indicted. Melissa Granger took a plea deal and testified against him. My mother apologized after the trial. I listened. Then I walked away. Some betrayals warrant forgiveness. Others merit a clean break. My father had spent his life earning that money. I had spent mine, proving it was mine to spend.
Never let greed destroy your family, because the truth always finds its way. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and join me for more stories that remind us why honesty always wins.